So, hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Toole at KELLYTHUL on Twitter. Mike, I'm confused. I thought by this episode you would have changed your Twitter handle. Official Pagan was great, but I thought you were going to be at Friction Guy from now on all social media. Is that not the case?
No. Well, see, I've always been a Friction Guy, and I think that people who know me and really know me personally and understand my soul know that I'm a Friction Guy.
For the listeners, so we're assisting Mike with his transition. So for most of this show, you will hear me as in the past. I usually refer to him as Mike. For most of this episode, I intend to refer to him as Friction Guy, FG, Frick. These types of things. The big F guy, those types of things. We're test driving it. I think we're just trying it out to see if it'll run a little bit better. And Mike's totally supportive. I talked to him before the show. He said, absolutely go for that.
Yes, I did. I mean, hey, the last episode, I kind of sprung my recommendation on Kelly, and by this point, let's face it, you guys are all pretty worn out from that Velma and Daphne video that I recommended. So you need us to just, take it light and easy and just have a good time tonight.
It's all flooding back. I had put the Scooby-Doo behind me.
Now, Kelly, be honest with us. Did you watch the video?
Well, FG, I am afraid to say that I have not yet had the opportunity, but I'm still in process of doing the final edit on the podcast for that and the blog post. So maybe in the spirit of kind of evaluating what my options are, we'll have to see how it plays out. But to date, my search history is clean of Scooby-Doo porn. I'm proud to say.
Now, if you want, I could just send you a direct link to the video.
Whatever you want, FG. It's up to you.
I mean, we're going to need it for the blog post, right?
Perhaps not. There's much work. This is going to be a fairly complicated blog post because there's a certain amount of disclaiming I feel is going to be necessary to do. Haven't exactly sorted out how I do, and I know your life's goal is to generate disclaimers. So I expect you're going to be a very happy man.
Speaking of disclaimers, and I know we're getting way off topic before we even get on to our topic, but I don't know, for anybody who follows me on Instagram, not any of the other terrible social media like Snapchat that Kelly and I don't use, but for, the fine, upstanding people who use Instagram, a number of my posts have had a disclaimer added to it by Instagram.
Really?
Yeah, so I'm wearing that right now as sort of a badge of honor.
What does the disclaimer say?
It basically says that the post you're about to look at, like a little pop-up comes up and says the post you're about to look at. I can't remember the exact wording. I did screenshot the disclaimer and make that a post. It says something along the lines of the post you're about to look at could lead to self-injurious behavior kind of thing. And there's like a link to a suicide help site, suicide prevention help site. Not help with suicide, not like a euthanasia site.
Now maybe that's the new blog. That's the new podcast we need to be doing. Suicide help podcast. It's like, well, you could try this and you could try that. We'll look into that.
All right, but we are here today to discuss Alice Cooper Goes to Hell, the second Alice solo record. Before we get into the individual tracks, what's your overall take on this one, Kelly?
So I about fell over in preparation for this podcast on it because, and math is math and facts are facts. Mike and I are talking about a 40-year-old album today, folks. This album is 40 years old. Wow, how time flies. Released in the bicentennial year, 1976. His second solo work. My kind of overall reaction is this continues track of Alice the showman and kind of performer versus Alice the rocker. And so there's some neat moments and fun, interesting things in it. It's definitely not like Love It to Death, not like Killer. So it's different there. And it is somewhat a continuation, including the title character, or not the title character, but Stephen, who we met in Welcome to My Nightmare, is represented heavily in the liner notes for this album as kind of a continuation of the nightmare. And any album that's basically about hell must be a disco is okay by me. How about you?
This one's kind of weird for me because, like we kind of discussed on Welcome to My Nightmare, being more polished, a little more showy, I was okay with that because it fit the theme of the record, but it just didn't have that punch for me, that Detroit rock sound, which is why I kind of fell behind the other records a little bit for me. This really goes one step further to that, and a lot of this kind of falls into that like adult-oriented rock category. And this is really like taking it one step, like not just polished, but these are like radio rock songs of the era.
Yeah, I think polished is a great phrase to this is very, very produced, very polished, not antiseptic, but it doesn't have that rawness that we've seen in other Alice works.
No, definitely. It just in general, overall, and there is some moments of it, but I miss the Alice snarl on this record.
Yeah, and there are several completely snarl-free moments in this album.
I would say it's largely snarl-free.
And at the end of the show, outside of the rankings, which I'm sure everybody's waiting for, with bated breath, we'll also do the other feature we've added, which is picking the song that Pat Boone would sing off of this album. And I think a bit of a flag is there are a number of choices on this album for what could be.
I was just going to say Pat Boone could almost do an Alice Cooper tribute album off of this.
Yeah, pretty close. There'll be a few songs, like the first one I believe would not be Mr. Boone's wheelhouse, but
no, not at all. The first track is the sort of title track, "Go to Hell," and this is probably the most Alice Cooper sounding song on the record.
I'd agree 100% in terms of driving guitars, good rock, a little rough. I mean, in terms of it's got a little bit of edge to it, and some great humor as well.
Yeah, the lyrics are kind of like campy, but self-referential, campy, sort of like a wink and nod to the listener, which is cool and it works for this song. It's a good song. I've heard a bunch of covers of it. It was covered on the Humanary Stew record, that sort of all-star Alice Cooper tribute record that we had talked about a little bit before. I think Dee Snider sang it on that record.
Yep, that was I was gonna mention that because it was Dee. There was actually it was a couple, and I don't think it was all folks from Twisted Sister, but Dee was, I think, the main featured one. But there were a couple folks on that particular track. But it's a good one for me. Like I said, the humor, while self-referential, is pretty good in there, and the lyric, "You're something that never should have happened. You even make your grandma sick. What's not to love?" Which I kind of like to make my ringtone at some point, but I'm being very cautious about copyright law these days.
I know. Yeah. Kelly, for anyone who doesn't know, Kelly's outlaw status is forever cemented now.
Gotten my first strike on YouTube for copyright infringement, so I'm straightening up and flying straight, gonna do the right thing and bug Mike for music a lot. So that's what we're gonna do from now on.
Well, you know what? You have to be careful because second strike includes a cavity search.
I did not see that in copyright school. There's a nice little video that they kind of say, "Hey, you watch this because you need help." They didn't mention the cavity search, but I guess that's something to look forward to.
See, now you are going to intentionally violate copyrights.
I'll reflect upon that.
Infringe away, sir. There's no judgments here.
I think that we'll put that in the blog post because I need closure on that. But yeah, but this is about it for true driving rock and roll.
Yeah, this is as Alice as this record gets. And it also, one thing that does happen on this song that continues through the entire album is it is very percussion intensive. There's a lot of not just drums, but a lot of various percussion instruments used on this, and that is the one thing that carries throughout the entire album that we hadn't seen before on Alice Cooper records.
True, and from a bass perspective, Tony Levin of King Crimson and Peter Gabriel and a number of other things played bass on this album, and so you get a little bit of that featuring too. But it's clearly percussion. Drums, percussion are heavy, including some bongos coming up, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, well, Go to Hell takes us right into You Gotta Dance, which I believe you may have alluded to already a little bit in our setup for this one. So why don't you regale us with your opinion, sir?
So this is a story. This is a story of Alice going to hell. And so you need to try to determine what is the most painful, horrible environment a person could be in if they're in hell. And if you're a card-carrying Alice Cooper fan, that would be a disco. And so that's what Alice has created in this storyline, is that basically hell is a disco. And there is, and I believe I will be able to find this YouTube clip and include it on. There was an awards show that Alice was on where he performed Go to Hell. And the tour to support this was actually canceled. So they had the big Welcome to My Nightmare tour. This particular album would have been a fantastic show, but Alice ended up canceling any tour to support it due to being sick. Anemia was the call there, but I think we started to see a hint of what Hell would have looked like on the stage show, which would have been, of course, the big mirror balls type of thing going, but a big Hell, Hell, in disco letters over the top. So Hell is a Disco, and You Gotta Dance is, yes, folks, a song, which I really have a hard time with in many ways, because I do not care for that form of music, and this is that form of music, but it's Alice doing it, so it's kind of not as repulsive, but it's still a disco song. But he's having to establish that Hell's a disco. Is this a toe tapper for you, Mike?
It's weird for me because I understand conceptually where he's coming from, the whole Hell is a Disco thing, and I like that concept. But like you said, I just don't like disco. So to take it as a song, once you get past the concept and just try and enjoy the music, I can't too much.
Yeah, and when you're listening to a song and you get ain't no two ways about it kind of in there, it's like, no, this is wrong. That kind of phraseology should never be present on an Alice Cooper album. But it is, to set the mood so that you all know that Hell's a Disco.
And again, I get it. And this might have been something that worked really well in a live setting if there was the big produced show to support this the way they had done with Welcome to Nightmare, like you said, before the tour was canceled. It probably would have given audiences a very different perspective on this song.
Yeah, but absent visuals, absent being kind of fit into a story and context, it's this disco song sitting on an Alice Cooper album. Troubling.
Yeah, it is. Let's move on. Let's get away from it. I'm the Coolest. What are your thoughts on this one?
So are you just referencing yourself here, or are we talking about the song?
Oh, I was throwing it out there. I'm the Coolest. Just let me know you agree with me, and then we can move on to the song.
Yeah, ironically, yes, you're the coolest, Mike. And ironically, this next song is titled I'm the Coolest. And so this is the Some Folks of what Some Folks was to Welcome to My Nightmare. I'm the Coolest is to Alice Cooper Goes to Hell. And so we were told to go to hell in the first song. We went to hell, discovered it was a disco in the second song. And of course, if you're in the disco hell, you're probably going to meet somebody, and that would be Satan. And so this is Satan's song on Goes to Hell. It's a very kind of jazzy, slow-moving, spoken, not sung song, finishing off at the end with sort of a soft shoe tap dance thing. He's like, "Sand dancer, come on," kind of at the end, which is another unique moment in Alice Cooper lore. But I like the song. He sings it in a really kind of low voice. It's spoken, talks it in a low voice. It is kind of that cool jazz type of thing where he's just talking about the devil saying how cool he is. And I like the song. Again, at this point, I've come to accept I'm not going to be getting Killer. I'm not going to be getting Love It to Death. And so I enjoy the song. I think it's fun, and in the context of the story, it's like, well, if you're going to introduce the devil, this is a nice devil song.
Yeah, kind of the same for me. It doesn't work necessarily as an Alice Cooper song, but where it kind of varies from You Gotta Dance is when I don't mind listening to it the same way. Like, I understand conceptually where You Gotta Dance is coming in, but I don't really want to hear a disco song without that visual attached to it to show me the story. With this one, I don't need the visual as much. It's not my favorite song. It's on this record. It's certainly not my favorite Alice Cooper song, but I can appreciate it more than You Gotta Dance.
Yes, and it got us out of You Gotta Dance, so it always will have a special place in my heart that it made it go away.
It's a palate cleanser.
Yes.
And like Kelly said, it is different than anything we've heard up until this point in the sense that it is essentially a spoken word track.
Yep, just kind of meanders along, smoky and cool, and
it's kind of like Leonard Cohen in a jazz club.
If Leonard was the Prince of Darkness.
Right. All right, so moving along, we have Didn't We Meet?
So I'm going to be interested in your cut on this. So this was one of the ones that was very interesting to me in that it's an upbeat song or up-tempo song, and it's a little bit of kind of this, again, it's very much kind of story-driven at this point, and about didn't we meet in the night in my sleep somewhere. It's a little bit about Alice kind of responding back to just meeting Leonard Cohen in the previous song. And it's it's like I said, it's up tempo, it's kind of fun, but it's just almost to me too clean, too produced, and then not raw enough. It's a nice enough song. It's got a good pace to it, but it never hits overdrive for me.
Yeah, it's indicative of the way much of this record falls for me. It's overproduced. It's a little bit too polished. It's not Alice enough for me. It's not bad. I don't mind listening to it. It's not a bad song, and that's the way I feel about most of these songs. They're not necessarily bad songs, but these are polished radio rock songs of their era.
Yeah, I'd agree.
And of course, that takes us into, I would say, the best known song off of this record. Is that fair to say?
I would say it'd have to be.
Yeah, and that is "I Never Cry," which is another Alice ballad. Although instead of throwing it to you, I'm gonna throw out a little bit of a quibble right away because I kind of want to hear your reaction to it as you give me your response to the song. I don't mind ballads, and I think that this is a good ballad. And he's already proven himself to be a good ballad singer. And in a way, this is kind of like, to me, like a spiritual successor to "Only Women Bleed." It would have worked better for me had it come instead of a polished radio song, had it come after a driving rock song. I think you can appreciate a ballad better if you have something a little rough and harder edge that comes before it.
I'd agree wholeheartedly, and kind of on this, if Alice had checked with Mike and I to kind of help structure this 40 years ago. So maybe "I Never Cry." I mean, basically, there's maybe one other chance a little bit later. But right after "Go to Hell," if you started to kind of look at the track lineup a little bit, maybe have it keep us out of the disco for a little while longer.
Yeah, you know what? That really, you really hit it. The track lineup and the sequencing of this album is sort of my biggest issue with it, because we just get we start off really strong and then we get hit with that weird disco thing, and then we spend the bulk of this album in these sort of like slow to mid-tempo polished rock songs. We get none of that variation that we need to kind of keep it fresh and keep it interesting. And this is a really strong song, I think, but when you just sandwich it in between all these other songs that aren't much faster than the ballad, you just don't get the impact that you should.
Yeah, and I think of his Alice had success on three ballads in particular: "Only Women Bleed," "I Never Cry," and then "How You Gonna See Me Now," which will be coming up here in a little bit. To me, this is his best ballad. It was also his highest tracking single until "Poison." So there's going to be a long, where this was the band that was cranking out "Billion Dollar Babies," "Elected," "I'm 18," "Under My Wheels." All of these songs are coming out, and yes, and "No More Mr. Nice Guy" did really well too. Not the
regardless of our feelings of it.
Yes, they were generating singles that were doing very well in the charts. "Only Women Bleed" did well in the charts, but this is Alice succeeding, not with a rock song, but a ballad. "Welcome to My Nightmare" did well. I don't know how well it charted, but it did well. But this is his highest charting one until "Poison."
And I personally enjoy this song. I think it's a really good song. I just wish it had come after "Go to Hell" or something like that, where we could really appreciate the calm before or after a storm, rather than the mid-tempo to the low tempo and back to mid-tempo again.
Yeah. To my way of thinking, there are two songs in the universe that you can, no matter how impaired you are in an evening of drinking a lot of Diet Coke or whatever you might want to be doing at a karaoke place, there are only the top two songs that, no matter how late a night you've had, you can get up and do a perfectly acceptable job, are "Is She Really Going Out with Him" by Joe Jackson and "I Never Cry" by Alice Cooper.
So, Kelly, is this a personal story?
It's a goal. That's going to be my karaoke set list right there.
I like it, the double shot on karaoke. And, of course, this is a alcohol referencing song.
Yes, and even further confessional down the road on another album, but this is kind of a reflection upon the consequences of sometimes he drinks more than he needs. A little bit of true life maybe working its way into the Alice storyline.
All right, so moving on from that, we have "Give the Kid a Break."
Another one I'm fascinated to hear your read on. I like this song quite a bit, but I like Weird Al songs too, and to me, there's a very strong correlation to that because while there are a lot of times where Alice is really, really funny, and there are funny moments in other songs, there's a lot of good humor working its way through different songs. This is a funny song, but this is about as far away from subtle as an attempt for humor as you can possibly get because it's basically Alice debating with the devil about why don't you give me a break, and it's over the top and it's hokey. It's got a doo-wop girls chorus that turns on them halfway through the song and starts singing "Don't Give the Kid a Break," and I like it. It's a fun song sung by Alice Cooper, not an Alice Cooper song for me.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. It's not like, so in Go to Hell, you have some like campy winking at the audience kind of humor in there. This goes all the way into sort of hokey though. I don't dislike it. I do like the song. But when you pair it with the fact that, again, how great would I Never Cry been if it came right after Go to Hell and was followed by another more driving rock song like that? That would have placed this album. And going into this, I don't know if I've said it on the actual show, but in our little discussion before the show, I said, I don't know coming into this episode where I'm going to put this album yet on my list. I was going to decide as we talk this thing out.
Yeah, and I'm in the same boat, and it has moved it has moved positions as we kind of go through each song. It's like, oh, yeah, it's kind of going up a little bit. Nah, it's kind of coming back down a little bit, and so it's
exactly. There's definitely like I don't know how far it's jumping up and down on your list, but there's strong peaks and valleys on this thing.
Yeah. No, it's not like rocketing up to challenge for a three-way tie or anything like that.
Yeah, no, it's not. This is not one that I see, and that's the other thing too. Now that we have a handful of albums on our list, I'm not just thinking, okay, where does this place for me? I'm thinking about the list as a whole, not just does it edge out this album or that album, but more like 5 more albums down the line. Where is this thing going to stand?
Yeah, I've been having the same thought, and just kind of with some of the things coming up, it's going to be interesting to see. This one's just a wild card. I mean, it's really tough because there are moments here that are very kind of special and cool and fun. Then there are moments that are just a little more overproduced. Not bad. This is still good entertainment, but in terms of what you get in other offerings, it falls shorter of those.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like I didn't, and I re-listen to each of these before we do the podcast, and like listening to it, I didn't mind it at all. I still enjoyed myself. There's just, it never gets to a point where like I'm really into it the same way I am a lot of the other Alice Cooper records. I don't dislike it the way I did the first two, but I'm just never like, it's never going to come close to like the top records for me.
Yeah.
This is one I see bouncing around a lot, like in the middle.
Yeah, when we get to the it'll be interesting to see, because I've got it next to another album, and I'm just trying to figure out which one's ahead of the other. And so we'll get there. We'll get there shortly. But after we get a break, we go to, so this is where we get back to a little bit of more driving rock and roll with Guilty.
A little bit, not quite the way we did with Go to Hell though.
No, and again, highly produced. And when you hear Guilty live, it's well, you get away from the production value that you get on this album, and it's a pretty good rockin' song when it's done with the band live. And it's even on the album, it's still up tempo, but it's very produced. It's a fun song. Definitely kind of drives the point home to say, yeah, okay, I'm guilty. I don't care. I'm guilty, and I think I was framed anyway. So. Those parts are kind of cool, and then we actually a little bit later we'll touch on this in a future album. Guilty kind of makes a return in a little kind of sub reference to in a future song, but I like it. It's we get back to a little bit more of driving rock and roll, but it's not hammer down.
Yeah, it would be, if we had to rank the tracks on the album, it would be higher up there for me. Just because it is a little bit more driving, a little bit more rock-based. If anything, though, it just kind of reminds me of the fact that this is what this album is missing. Being too polished, being too mid to low tempo.
Yeah, and even when he breaks out on this one to start to get back into that territory, it just kind of gets produced down enough that it doesn't drive you past the line of kind of really, really hard stuff.
And that would take us into Wake Me Gently.
Before you go. Oh boy, not a fan. From a narrative standpoint, this is the idea of the extension of the nightmare and Alice going to hell, and hell's a disco, and he doesn't want to be there, and he wants someone to wake him. So storyline wise, it serves a role. It fits for that. It kind of rounds out making the concept complete. Whereas I Never Cry is a ballad that is a really good ballad and something that's kind of very enjoyable to hear on repeated listenings. This is just like a ballad that doesn't suck. It's about the best I can give it.
Yeah, and so I agree with you that narratively it really works. The thing with a concept album, when you're doing a literal concept album of, actually telling the story with each song being sort of a continuation of the narrative that came before it, not just, songs that have a similar theme or a loose thread that connects them, but an actual narrative the way that this record has. It's great that it works in that sense, but what really pushes an album like that over for me is if I could listen to all of these songs on their own and enjoy them as standalone songs, and I can't with this song.
Yeah, this would not be on any mixtape that I would be creating for anyone. So.
Yeah, if we were making an Alice Cooper playlist, this wouldn't be on.
No.
What takes us to Wish You Were Here?
Which would be on some playlists for me. This is where the bongos I mentioned a little bit earlier make an appearance. Having a hell of a time, my dear. Wish you were here. Pretty great way to sing a song in hell. So I think that's pretty fun. It is second only to Go to Hell in terms of drive. There's some pretty good guitar work on multiple points through this. Again, it suffers, in my opinion, from maybe a little bit of overproduction because it could have been good. And it's another one that live, whole different animal, very, 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 very driving there. But this is a good song. We were due in kind of working through the album that it's been since Go to Hell that we've had really anything real big punch. Guilty was the closest thing to it until then. So I'm glad it showed up. It helps it back into the album. It's clever, and so I like it's probably my second favorite song on this album after Go to Hell.
It's probably like third for me. It's definitely up there though. Again, it's overproduced, but it reminds us that we should have had more of this drive on the record. It really needs that to make this stand on its own the way the classic records did, and for me it doesn't get there because of that.
Yeah, and it teases you a little bit because at the kind of very tail end of it, where they kind of turn it over to some pretty great guitar work at the end, it's very similar to Black Widow in terms of some of the guitar work in Black Widow, not riff for riff, but that at least the feel and those types of things. And so that's pretty cool. But you're like, it's tacked on the end. It's nice. It really kind of rounds the song out nicely. So it's, like I said, I like it, but to your point, Sarah, there's just a couple things that take it away from being a home run.
Yeah, and that's the way I feel about a lot of this record. If they'd let it, give us a little bit more rock, a little more rough around the edges here and there, it could have been a much stronger record, probably.
Yeah, which is the puzzler, because this album is credited to, as far as the songwriting goes, Alice Cooper, Dick Wagner, and Bob Ezrin have writing credits for basically everything except the next little treasure we're going to talk about. And then I Never Cry was actually just Alice and Dick Wagner. And as I believe Only Women Bleed was also Alice and Dick Wagner. But most of this is it. And, Ezrin's the guy that brought Detroit sound to Alice. We talked about this last album. And so, this is the second one. And while Welcome to My Nightmare started to get a little more showy, a little more polished, this goes the next step.
Yeah, this is definitely like a radio rock record. It's interesting, the perspective that you just put it in. Like, Ezrin is the guy who brought that tough, driving Detroit rock sound to this, and now he's kind of the guy taking it away.
Yeah, what's up with that, Bob? Not cool.
You have a lot to answer to, Ezrin.
Especially the next song.
So, that takes us to I'm Always Chasing Rainbows. Hey, Kelly, what do you think of this one?
I hate it. I hate it. So I get it. It's ironic to have Alice Cooper singing about I'm always chasing rainbows. It fits again in a bit of the narrative of continuation of the nightmare started on the last album and continued through this. And again, this is where to me the song order kind of is jacked up because it's like Wake Me Gently, but then I'm Glad to Be in Hell to I'm Chasing Rainbows. So I probably would have flipped if it had been Wake Me Gently, then going into Chasing Rainbows, and then the next song, then narratively would have made more sense to me. But this is the standard. This is the actual I'm Always Chasing Rainbows song, and so there's that kind of irony of Alice Cooper singing kind of a standard from the 30s or something like that. But I can't find anything really good to say about this song. There's beyond the fact of the minimal shock value of Alice singing a 1930s standard.
Yeah, just like You Gotta Dance, I understand where this falls in the narrative. I just don't like it as a song, and probably even more so than You Gotta Dance.
Yep.
Yeah, I really don't have a whole lot to say about it. I kind of wish it wasn't on here.
This would have been a great edit for me. I think it's totally, particularly because of the next song. Because if we're just trying to kind of establish Nightmare's over and he's coming out of it, it's accomplished with the next song. So it's just, this seemed like an unnecessary 1-2 punch when neither punch is particularly strong, but this one really is like,
this is, for me, is the lowest point in this record.
Yeah, it's the woman machine goes to hell.
Yeah. So, well, you already mentioned it. Going Home is our closing track. What are your thoughts?
So I'm going to kind of go back to what I said with Welcome to My Nightmare, in that well-crafted, interesting storyline through there. It's a narrative trend, at least through the album, bringing it all the way to an end. It creates closure to the storyline in a nice way for that, but it's just kind of average at best in terms of a song. It does its job to finish it off. It is definitely superior to I'm Only Chasing Rainbows to carry that task.
I feel like that is a low set bar right there, though.
Yes, it is. But so another one that I'm not like a huge fan on. Again, it makes sense on how it ends the album, but it of all the, we talked a lot about overproduced throughout this. If there's one song that reeks of that, it's this song for me.
Yeah, this is probably the best example of that on the record. And like you said, it closes out the narrative well, but there's just no punch to it. And to me, if you're, going the epic storytelling route of this one narrative that carries through each track and advances with each song, I really need the big drama at the end, and we don't really get it.
I would agree completely.
So now's that time then.
Before we do, and this is going to be tough. So I think we need to take I'm Always Chasing Rainbows out of contention since it wasn't written by Alice.
Right. Because it is the most obvious one, but it's not an Alice song.
Yeah. So we'll take because he could have covered that by the original artist. So what is your Pat Boone song for Goes to Hell?
So there's a few that seem obvious, and I'm going to go with a less obvious one and say You Gotta Dance.
That was a strong candidate for me, and I could see Pat Boone just ripping that one up, just doing giving it the full Pat Boone treatment.
Because going with one of the slower tempo songs or even the ballad, definitely there's a few tracks on here that would fit well within Pat Boone's wheelhouse. But at the time that he did the Alice Cooper cover, he was trying to reach the younger audience and connect with edgier music and stuff like that. If he were to listen to this record, in my opinion, he would think You Gotta Dance was like the edgy hip song of the time, not understanding the irony intended of the song in the context of the album.
Good call. I could absolutely see that. I'm going to go a little differently. Also probably with one you might not expect, but I'm going to go with, and this pains me because it's actually one of my more favorite songs on the album, but I'm going to go with Give the Kid a Break because it's got a nice hokey factor to it that I think would speak to Pat, and he'd say he'd be wanting to be given a break and interacting with his doo-wop chorus girl singers along with them. So
it's a good point. I think either one is a solid Pat Boone choice. And, I mean, he really wouldn't go wrong with almost anything on here, with the exception of Go to Hell. I think that's the only one he'd stay away from.
Yep, I agree, because I think he would totally destroy it, but he could do Wish You Were Here. But it would be would be a crime against humanity for him to do that. But yeah, I think he couldn't touch Go to Hell, which tells you probably why Go to Hell's the best song on this album.
The least Pat Boone friendly track is one of the strongest.
The Pat Boone test. Okay.
All right, so here it is, sir.
Oh, all right. So you got to go first. Or am I going to go first on this?
You know what? You're going to go first. I was the Sherpa this time, so you're going to have to go first. In fact, I think I'm going to go on the site and pull up our rankings because I'm still not 100% set yet.
Yeah, I've just done that as well. So, gang, we have done. This is the 9th Alice Cooper album. Very likely, this is going to be nestling in the middle to bottom half of that list. I think that's probably where both Mike and I are. For your reference purposes, Welcome to My Nightmare was number 5. Our last album reviewed for Mike, I had it actually at number 4. That's kind of where that one landed. It's not gonna be there. It's not gonna be for me. So in that part of my list, we've got Welcome to My Nightmares number 4, then School's Out, Muscle of Love, and then The Barrier of Easy Action and Pretty's for You, which it's going to be hard for any album to bust through that floor. So my struggle is coming into this show. Do I like Muscle of Love better than Alice Cooper Goes to Hell? And trying to figure out which one. One's going to be 6 and one's going to be 7. I originally was going to actually have it ahead of Muscle of Love because I actually listened to Goes to Hell more than Muscle of Love. And so I thought, well, that must be indication that I like it a little bit better. But when I kind of go through that, and if I can only say in terms of songs that are just super awesome, things like Go to Hell, Give the Kid a Break, I Never Cry is very solid too, and Wish You Were Here. If those are ones, and then I put that up against Working Up a Sweat and Big Apple Dreamin' and Crazy Little Child, which is another kind of goofy Alice song that I like quite a bit. I'm going to land with putting it just above our floor and put it at number 7. So bottom of my list will read number 6, Muscle of Love, number 7, Alice Cooper Goes to Hell, number 8, Easy Action, and number 9, Pretty's for You.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much on the same page here. I'm going to put it right above Easy Action, I think. Looking at my list as you started talking through it, to me, actually, right before you said it, I was like, so this is going to come down to, do I like Muscle of Love or Goes to Hell better? I put Welcome to My Nightmare below School's Out, but this doesn't quite hit the level of Welcome to My Nightmare. So it came down to Muscle of Love, and just like you said, I've definitely listened to this more than I've listened to Muscle of Love. But talking it out, it's really just a few tracks that I listen to that get the regular rotation for me, whereas more of Muscle of Love I like overall. So it's going to go below Muscle of Love.
All righty. So we will get the blog post updated to reflect those new rankings, and going to need some guidance here in terms of actual chronological order. The next Alice Cooper album would be a live album, The Alice Cooper Show, which was recorded on the... No, I'm sorry. I take that back. We've got
Lace and Whiskey first.
Never mind. Scratch that. Very simple. We'll be talking about Lace and Whiskey next time, which should prove to also be a very interesting conversation, I think. You may hear Mike and I saying, so then I had to decide, do I like Muscle of Love better than Lace and Whiskey? So I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's a few coming up that aren't really vying for the top spots for me. What's going to be interesting is when we get into some of the, for me, it's like when you hit the 90s with the Alice solo stuff, I feel like those can land, like late 80s on, could land anywhere on this list.
I think there could, and for me, From the Inside, which will be not too far away for us, that's a bit of a wild card because there's some interesting things going on with that one. And that's like 78. But then we get some of the 90s ones. There's there's going to be some very interesting conversations coming up, and there's some great diversity coming up.
Oh, there's a lot of great diversity, and then there's a lot of records that really divide fans. It's funny because in my office this week, we discussed Constrictor at great length, and that's one of those records that I know really divides a lot of fans. And then in the 90s, you really hit that with albums like Brutal Planet, Dragontown. I mean, there's that 90s and the early 2000s. There's a lot of division there.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and Constrictor is definitely one, I would say, of albums that people are polarized on for Alice. for whatever reason, Constrictor seems to generate either some people who are like, man, I really, really like this album, or wow, I hated every inch of this.
Yeah, it is definitely. It's such a polarizing record. That's one that I'm really excited to talk about because I would say 80% of the Alice fans that I talk to just venomously hate that record. But then you find those guys, and one of them is one of the guys that I work with. You find those guys that Constrictor is just a defining album for them.
I'd probably get along with that guy. I don't know about defining per se, but yeah, that'll be a fun one to talk through too, because it's all over the place.
Yeah, that's for me, that's like near the top of my list in ones that I'm excited to discuss, the most excited to discuss. Like Constrictor, Brutal Planet, and Dragon Town are probably the ones I'm most excited to discuss because those are the ones that, in my experience, divide fans the most.
Yeah, I think those are all good calls, and I'm interested to kind of hear because From the Inside has always kind of had a special place in my heart in terms of the Alice stuff, because it was the very first time I saw Alice live in concert was of the tour supporting From the Inside. And so,
how many times have you seen Alice now live?
Upwards of 25, 26, I'd say, and so I got to see him for. First two concerts were, the first one was to support From the Inside, which was amazing. And then we've talked about Coke Alice. I got to see Coke Alice, Special Forces, the Special Forces tour, paramilitary, your crazy aunt with a hair bun Alice in a leather jacket and weighed about 10 pounds. It was still a pretty good concert though. but it's, about, like I said, on the upward side 25 times, including a lot of the ones to also support Brutal Planet and Dragon Town, which were pretty great concerts. So looking forward to talking about all of those.
Yeah, I did not get a chance to see Alice during that like Brutal Planet to Dragon Town era, but I have seen like the live DVDs and stuff that came out from that era, and I really wish I had seen it because watching the shows, they were really impressive.
They were fun, super fun. Well, great. Well, we have made it through another Next Squad Cobbler. We'll be doing some recommendations again. Always look forward to that, Mike, to see what you might come up with for the next recommendation. And then after that, we've got Lace and Whiskey, which should also prove to have some very interesting conversations because it's even further different than Go to Hell.
And do you have a social media recommendation, sir? Because, last time you wouldn't give us one to punish me.
Yeah, and I think I need to continue that punishment. I think your sentence is over on the Next Squad Cobbler, and I'll offer a social media recommendation at that point in time. Do you have one for today?
You know what? I'm going to go with our friend Dylan Lang.
Oh, are you really?
I was recently, I don't know if you know this, but I was recently on Dylan Knows, the inaugural episode of his Dylan Knows Movies subset or sub-series or whatever you want to call it. And it was the first time he did a Dylan Knows Movies, and I got the honor of being the first guest. And we discussed Showgirls. We mostly discussed things that were not Showgirls, but we also discussed the movie Showgirls.
And so are you recommending Dylan's YouTube channel in general?
Yeah, you know what? It is a social media recommendation, but I'm going to say jump on Dylan's YouTube channel. Like not specifically, Twitter or Facebook or anything like that, but jump on the YouTube channel, check out some Dylan Knows, get a feel for what the show is, then watch the Showgirls one.
Yeah, at night when there aren't children present.
There might be a couple of harsh words used.
I'd say it gets a little edgy, maybe from time to time.
Mild adult content.
Yes, that could be a good way to put it. And I guess the Easter egg hunt. So you can use Mike's social media recommendation. Go and take it, because on Dylan's YouTube channel, not only will you get the variations of Dylan Knows, whether it's the list show or the comic haul, or now the movie item from there, but you'll also get the wonderful assistant series. Currently still on hiatus, but you'll be able to kind of get caught all the way up to that as you wait for that to reboot. And if you want to do a bit of an Easter egg hunt, apparently Dylan has done, and these are YouTube, I believe these are just YouTube only. I don't think these show up on iTunes or anywhere else. So it's just a video show. But apparently there are 2 shows in the Dylan Knows canon where Dylan does all or most of the podcast without a shirt on. Showgirls one might be one of those. I'd say is one of those. And I'm too scared to find the other one, but Dylan did mention in the show that this was the second time, not the first time, that he had been shirtless for a video show, which is why you guys are really lucky that this is audio only, so you don't know what choices Mike and I are making.
It's true. It's true.
And on that note, I'm going to thank everybody for listening and look forward to catching up with you again soon. So thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. And there's a lot of Scooby-Doo porn in general that I didn't know existed until the last couple weeks.
You must be so proud.
I'm just proud of myself that I got through my entire recommendation without using any objectionable language.
Okay. Want to be cool like Alice Cooper, do coke.